From time to time, you see comedians, those who work with comedy, to say jokes. They get into trouble. They deal with topics that cause controversy. They will talk about the religion of someone or a group of society. Then that group will stand against them and condemn that comedian. And many don't understand that comedians learn in their profession the following saying: in comedy, nothing is sacred. That's what they learn. In other words, there's no subject that we don't talk about. Of course, certain comedians don't embrace this. Those with more or better common sense, they understand this, but others who are more extremists, they live this as a rule. But this concept of the nothing is sacred, it's not only about comedy, but in general, the world is increasingly trying to remove what is sacred from the mind and life of people. So when you go deeper into this subject, when you meditate on this subject, you realize that this movement, that it's not new, began in heaven, began with Lucifer. Lucifer having a different look at the throne of God, which there's nothing more sacred than the throne of God, which is the presence and authority of God, that became something that Lucifer could touch, not only touch, but take possession of. He wanted to take possession of the throne of God and sit there. And his thought was, if he can, why can't I? Why not? And with this idea, he managed to convince a third part of the angels who then rebelled in heaven. This is written in the Holy Scriptures. So this movement to question the sacred, to deal with the sacred as common, the untouchable as touchable, began with Lucifer. He was the first to have this idea and to disseminate this idea as he does until today. So the things that God declared as sacred, and there are many things that he considered to be sacred in our lives, Satan makes a point of distorting, profaning, making it secular, belittle the things that God declared sacred. For example, God is sacred. There's nothing more sacred than him. Satan comes and disseminates this idea in people's minds. God does not exist, and if he does, he's a monster. Marriage is sacred. Then the devil works to ridicule the institution called marriage, something outdated, retrograde, something that comes from the patriarchy. Again, the sacred family. So they use the same arguments. The man oppresses the women, the parents, the children. The Holy Scriptures. No, this is not sacred. It's just a collection of books made by men. A tally of books written by men filled with fairy tales. This is something outdated to ignorant people. So he throws the Holy Scriptures into the mud and everything else that is sacred. For example, life is sacred. God has declared life as sacred. In His word, men cannot even drink blood because in the blood there's life. But the devil tells the person to kill themselves. End your life. Life is short. Do whatever you have to do. Enjoy life. He tells the person to deal with life as smoke, as nothing. Die, because when you die, all will be over. So this is happening in the world, regardless of religion. You can verify what I'm telling you. If, on the one hand, God has designated sacred things, on the other, there are movements to counter the sacred, to desecrate the things that God considered as sacred. There in Ezekiel chapter 44 and verse 23, God himself says, "And they shall teach my people the difference between the holy and the unholy, and cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean." In other words, God aims and desires his people to be taught to differentiate and distinguish what is holy from what is not. Unholy is the complete opposite of holy. To discern between the unclean and the clean. God wants us to have this discernment. God wants us to make a distinction between what is holy and unholy. Why? Because when I understand and respect what is sacred, I am interacting physically with God. I interact physically with God himself, because he declared those things as sacred. So I respect them as sacred because he declared that. And when I demonstrate this respect towards what is sacred, I'm demonstrating respect towards him. For example, you will remember, and most probably you might have had a similar experience in your own home. I remember my mother buying a yogurt that my dad liked. Not only my dad, we also like that. Imagine, if my dad liked, imagine the children. She bought for all of us, and there was one for each person. There was no abundance, it was one for each one. So there was one for me, another for my sister, and one for my dad. She would come from the supermarket, put in the fridge, and I remember as if it was today, I can see her taking the packs of yogurts from the carrier bags and placing them in the fridge door, saying, "This one is your father's." She had to make a family gathering in the kitchen with the three of us. Our younger brother was not born yet, to tell us, "This is your father's. Do not eat and do not touch." And we would eat ours, but keep our eyes on his. But woe to us if we did that. Not that he would spank us or something like this, no, but we understood that that was severe disrespect to touch that little pot that belonged to our father. So with this, with a simple gesture, we learned to respect the father. My father was not at home, but when we would open the fridge, we would flirt, per se, with that pack of yogurt, but we would think, this is our father's. So our father will come to our memory whenever we looked at that pack of yogurt. Likewise is with the sacred, with God. When you respect what is sacred, because of God, you are showing respect towards him. You're showing fear, faith towards God. Do you understand? And I ask you, why would you would like to live in a world that respects the sacred? Let's change the question. would you like to live in a world that nothing is sacred? A world like the comedians, that nothing is sacred. Would you like to live in a world like this? What would the world be like if nothing was sacred? Where everything is acceptable. To take someone's woman, to kill, to steal, to take someone's property for yourself. What would the world be like if nothing was sacred? I assure you that it wouldn't be like the funny world of comedians. There wouldn't be any fun. In a world that nothing is sacred, what would happen is crying, weeping, total chaos, like hell. Because this is hell. That nothing is sacred indeed. And unfortunately, it seems that many want to go there. Because here, in life, they refuse to respect the sacred. I hope that you think better about it. And just as God spoke in Ezekiel 44:23, I am doing what He expects of me. He said, and they shall teach my people the difference between the holy and the unholy, and cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean. Very well, I'm doing precisely what God told me to do, teaching everyone to distinguish between the holy and the unholy. I'm teaching you. However, learn, you who have understanding. If today's video helped you and you know someone that could benefit from it, share it with them, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you may do so now. See you later.